in touch with those events in the life of Christ, those saving events. Obviously, the cross is the central part, but not the ending part. It represents excruciating pain, and I think that's why so many of us are attracted to the cross of Jesus and the passion of Jesus, because we all experience pain in our lives. We all experience suffering, and it's always a constant mystery to us. Why is this happening? Why is my mother, who was always so good and so faithful, why is she going through this terrible pain now? It's always the why question. We can never wrap our heads around the mystery of suffering. It's always one of those things that we just can't quite get. And it seems to be in contradiction to our belief in a God who is good and caring and loving. Where is this God now? When I'm in this pain, where is this loving, caring God? I can't see him. I can't find him. And that's when our faith is put to the test. Can I continue to believe in a loving and caring God when those I love are suffering so terribly? And God seems to be indifferent, seems to be out there someplace, but not here with me and with this person that I love. And so pain is also something that makes us turn inward, makes us angry and anxious and uncomfortable. And we get all caught up in it. And it makes life very difficult, because if we don't have strong faith in a moment like that, where can I turn? What can I do? Where can I go? How am I going to get through this? We have to remember that way back, we spoke about baptism before, that the cross is not only a symbol of suffering, but it's a sign of victory. And that's the final line. We were baptized with a cross, the priest putting a cross on our forehead. I claim you for Jesus Christ in the name of his cross, the Father, Son, and Spirit. So we are people of the cross. We always have been from the day we began our life in Christ. And we have lived with that sign of the cross. And it plays such an important part in our lives. Like just going back to Guatemala for a minute, I always remember a little man that I met in the town square. And he came up, he was one of these men who always hung around the church. It was early in the morning, he was in the church, he was helping the priest, and always doing something in the parish. But he wanted to show me, he had a beautiful cross around his neck, with all vibrant colors. And he wanted me to see it, because that was very, very important to him. And so I blessed it for him. I was over at the blessing, I blessed it for him. And it's in the sign of that cross, that was this man's strength. That's how he lived his impoverished life. It was his faith that carried him. There's this other story that comes to mind too. I thought of it on the way over. I wasn't intending to say this, but if the Lord put it in my mind, he must want me to say it, so I'm saying it. I knew a man in one of the parishes where I lived, and he had cancer, terrible cancer. A wonderful man. I interviewed him and his wife when his sons were preparing for confirmation. And he was very religious, in a very simple, not in a showy way, but in a strong, simple way. He got cancer. And so I went to visit him one time, and then the second time I said, what can I bring him to give him some strength? And I had this wonderful little cross. It didn't have the corpus on it. It was very contemporary, very narrow, thin, and it had no corpus on it, just the cross, about that big. So I brought it to him, and let just hold on to this when things get rough. Well, he thought unbelievably about this cross, and he was in a bed, one of those portable beds in his living room, and he put the cross on the lampshade, which was right above where he was sitting, so that he could see the cross. So the second time I went to visit him, the cross was still there. And he said, I showed your cross to my parish priest. And he said to me, but where is the corpus? And I said to him, the corpus is my pain. that's the cross. That's me. The cross is my pain. And when he died, I preached, mentioned that story. When I went to the home after the funeral, there was the cross right on the kitchen counter with the candle burning next to it and some flowers near it. And I said, you know what, that cross carried it. And I always try to do that now. From now on, when I visit somebody, especially if they're incurably ill, I always try to bring them some kind of a cross. They sell these little wooden crosses in some of the religious stores. And I said, you know, sometimes you reach a point where you're not able to pray. You just can't. You're in so much pain, you just can't even form the words. I said, hold on to the cross. Hold on to the cross. And don't say anything. Just hold on to the cross. Put yourself in union with Jesus' sufferings. I said, and that'll take care of itself. So it's a great, I do it all the time now. So if you have somebody who's incurably ill or in very serious pain and suffering, bring them a little cross that they can hold, even the cross at the end of their rosary, so that they can hold on to it. If you wish to be my disciples, Jesus said, take up your cross and follow me. So he tells us right up front, it ain't easy to be my follower. It always involves carrying the cross in some manner, shape, or form. It just always is. Either sooner or later, but it always is. And I want to tell you another story that's one of my fond stories over the years. And it's called, you may know of it, it's called The Story of the Three Trees. Do you know that story? Mm-hmm. The Story of the Three Trees. Pardon me? Three trees. Three trees? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, well, at any rate, there were 3 trees, and they're growing on a mountaintop in the forest. And they begin, as the days go by, they begin to dream, what do they want to be when they grow up? What would they like to do? What do they want to be? And the first tree said, he saw the stars in the sky at night, and they looked like diamonds shining, and he said, when I grow up, I hope I become a beautiful treasure chest that contains a lot of gems and beautiful things. The second tree saw a stream of water running by. He said, when I grow up, I want to be a great ship that carries important people and kings across the ocean. And the third tree looked down at the valley below and said, I want to grow very, very tall, so that when people look at me, they'll look up, and they'll look up to heaven, and they'll think of God. So the 3 trees grow, and time passes, and one day, 3 woodcutters come into the forest to cut down the trees. Well, the first tree was cut down, but it wasn't made into a treasure chest. It was made into just a wooden trough that animals might eat from. The second tree was not made into a mighty ship. It was made into a small fishing boat. And the third tree, like most trees, was just cut into long planks to be used in making all kinds of things. Well, the years go on again, and they kind of somewhat forgot their dreams. And rarely do things ever turn out as we dream they might. But the point is, they always turn out right. So one starlit night, a simple mother placed her newborn baby in the food trough because there was no place else to stay. It It didn't hold gems, but it held the greatest treasure the world has ever known.
Yeah.
One evening, a tired traveler and his friends got into a small fishing boat and were crossing the lake. And a storm came up. Their leader was fast asleep. They wake him up. And he wakes and he raises his hands and he calms the storm. One Friday morning, a man, broken and beaten, common criminal, is made to carry 2 beams up a mountainside, where then nails were driven through his hand and feet, and he died on that cross. None of the 3 trees grew up to be what they had hoped to be, but all of them grew up to have a very personal encounter with the Lord Jesus. And they really couldn't ask for more than that. On Sunday morning, the sun rose, and they found that everything was transformed by the love of God and the presence of Jesus. I think we have to look at our lives that way. It doesn't always work out according to our plan. In fact, sometimes our plans seem to be thrown up in the air and overlooked and crushed. But God is using those things to accomplish God's purpose. He is using those things to transform us. And He is telling us in so many words, in so many ways, that your life is important. You might not be the most important person in the parish. You might not be the most important person in town. You might not be the most popular person in the neighborhood. But your life is important, whatever it is and wherever you live it. So live it to the full. Live it with as much love as you can muster. You know, when we look at the crib of Jesus, the trough in the cave, that's really, isn't that the story of our birth in a way? How we were born? We were all born in different circumstances, in different places, but there was a mystery going on. Life is always a mystery, and it's God's mystery playing out in our lives. You know, it goes to the very inner core of our being. Sometimes we have a rough start in life. Sometimes we have a difficult family. Sometimes we're born into poverty. Sometimes we're excluded and looked down upon. Sometimes we're not welcomed. Sometimes we're not wanted. Sometimes we try and we fail. All of these things are part and parcel of life and growing up. My neighbors, I have new neighbors next door, and the woman was explaining that her son, who had recently been married, they were having their first child. And then as I was driving out one morning, she comes running out of the house and she says, "Oh, you gotta pray, you gotta pray." What happened? Well, the new baby, little James, they think he might have cystic fibrosis. And it's like, this moment of joy, this moment of expectation is turned into like a whole other thing. And they can't fathom, what is this baby going to be like? How are we going to cope? What is his life going to be like? And so forth and so on. And they're going through it at the present, so keep little baby James in your prayers. Because they're not sure exactly what's wrong with him. And something's wrong, but they're not sure how they're ever going to treat it. So, you know, something as gorgeous as birth starts out with a tragedy. And why is that? This poor little innocent baby, these poor children in Ukraine, why are they going through this? They didn't deserve this. Nobody deserves suffering. God does not create suffering to punish us. Please repeat that 1,000,000 times in your life. God does not give us pain to make us suffer, to punish us. God God does not punish. That's not God's role. Why would a loving God want to punish? For what? What purpose? What good is God going to get out of it, you know? So it doesn't cause us pain to punish us for some unknown sin or some guilty feeling that we have in our minds. God is the God of love. Always will be. Always has been. The boat kind of makes us think about our life growing up, our work, our family life, all the struggles that are part and parcel of life. Work is hard. You know, even if you love your work, you know, if you do it like for 40 years, you get tired of it after a while. You know, work is difficult. It demands something of us. We have to give something of ourselves. It costs something. And there are days when, you know, I can't wait to go to work because I want to see this one, that one, and the other one, and I want to do my job, this project that I'm working on. And other days I go, oh no, is it morning again? You know, and I have to go to work. And, you know, you go and even if you like the job, sometimes it gets wearing and it gets boring and it gets tiresome. They're all part of the struggle of working. And by your work, do you earn your daily bread? Sometimes, again, we might have a job that we think is the job of a lifetime. And we picture ourselves climbing the ladder and reaching the pinnacle of success, and oh, everything is like wonderful. You're the boss of the whole world. And that can come crashing down before you know it. And you can't grasp it. What happened here? Why did this happen? I was good at what I did. Why is so-and-so being promoted and I'm not? You know, why are they getting a raise and I'm not? All those things happen. They're part of life. You know, sometimes it makes us want to give up and throw it all in. The cross always reminds us of suffering and pain and illness and loss. And, you know, we all go through this. There's no way around it. Somebody you love will die. You will die and cause other people pain. That's the way life is. It's not a punishment. It's the way it is. And within that suffering, and that's what Jesus, I think, is trying to tell us by the cross, that within that suffering, I am with you. I'm there beside you. You may not see me, you may not even feel me, but I am there with you. I will never leave you. I love you and I care for you. These are words that we have to kind of repeat over and over again in our minds until they become so real that it becomes almost automatic. But it's difficult. It's difficult to do that. We do all we can to avoid suffering. Look at the people getting their vaccination. Like they hold themselves as if, oh my God, this is going to be terrible. I'm not going to be able to handle this. It's over in a second. So we were really very adverse to suffering. We tried to do anything to avoid it, and we're very tempted to give up. It's probably one of the hardest things to understand in life is suffering. And maybe that's why Jesus died on the cross, to show us that in the suffering is your salvation. You have to pick up the cross before you can enjoy Easter Sunday. It's the way it goes. There's no way around it. And so each of us is given a little piece of the cross to carry. You know the story about the people who had the various crosses. And I think it was the Lord who presented these crosses to the people. One was like a great big cross. The other was like kind of a medium-sized cross, and one was a little tiny cross. And he says, you can pick whichever one you want. And no, I don't want that big cross. Maybe I could handle the medium-sized one. I think I could do the small one. And then Jesus says, whichever one you pick is the one that I gave you. That's the one I gave you. the one that you can handle. And I don't put it on your backs to wear you down, but so that you can be lifted up on the cross with me. Pain is always something we want to avoid. And I think when we're going through painful periods, we have to revert to that prayer again. Prayer is always a good answer to almost anything. And it's in that prayer that we come in contact with the suffering Jesus. And he gives us the strength and the courage and the perseverance that we need to be able to carry that cross and move along with him. The Last Supper was a very beautiful time. And Gethsemane as well. Jesus goes out to the garden, as you know, and he's praying. And he's praying so hard that the sweat coming from his body becomes blood. And he prays like all of us pray, "Oh Lord, please let this cross pass me by." But he always adds, "Not my will, but yours be done." And that's the hard part. We all pray, "Get rid of this cross." Well, we don't like to say, but your will, not mine, be done. And that's always the test. And you always need friends to do that, don't you? Suffering alone is even worse than just plain suffering. That's why Jesus brings his closest friends with him to the garden. Humanly speaking, they fall asleep. We all need that core of friends, that community of support. Those who are around us, who love us and care for us. That's what enables us. And you saw it in the COVID situation. One of the most difficult things of going through that terrible experience and have to be hospitalized was that your loved ones couldn't come to see you. No loved one was there to hold your hand. That was probably even more painful than the disease itself. Because we need that support of family and community to enable ourselves to go through those difficult moments. God's story always ends in resurrection. There's always new life at the end. It never ends on Good Friday. There's always an Easter Sunday. That's the story. That's what gives us hope. That's what keeps us going. Because it's true. That's how the story ends every single time. Paul said, you were asking about St. Paul before, this is one of the things he said, is in the letter to the Colossians, "Even now I find my joy in the suffering I endure for you, O Lord. In my own flesh I fill up what is lacking in the suffering of Christ." Imagine that. That you were going to fill up what's lacking in the suffering of Christ. Jesus used words like that. That my suffering has value. It isn't just like a ruination of my life. It isn't just a downward thing. It's something that lifts us up and gives us life. I'm going to end with a little ceremony today. And maybe you might like to speak about crosses or sufferings for a few moments if you want. We can talk about that if you have something that you want to say or want to add, and then we'll end with this little ceremony of the cross.